It was a Tuesday. I was coming home from work when my neighbor on the left side of the street, a sweet but reserved lady, approached me at the gate. Her face was pale. Her hands were trembling. Without saying a word, she thrust a crumpled piece of paper into my hand and whispered, "She asked me to deliver this, but she promises me she'll be careful." I unfolded the paper with sweaty hands. The font was small, uncertain, but unmistakable. It was my daughter, Emily, 13 years old. And what it said took my breath away. "Please get me out of here. I can't take it anymore." I was paralyzed. The world around me faded. All I could hear was the sound of my own heart racing. I reread the note 3 times. It didn't make sense. Emily had lived with her mother since we separated 2 years ago. We had joint custody, but most of the time she stayed there. Whenever she came to spend the weekend with me, she said everything was fine. So, why now? I looked at my neighbor. She was visibly uncomfortable, looking around as if afraid someone would see her. She said, "She threw this over the fence. She asked me to give it to you without anyone knowing." She looked scared, very scared. I thanked him, even though I didn't know what to do. I walked into the house, trembling. Share this story to reach further. Subscribe to the channel. Share this video on WhatsApp and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. I'll be very happy to read each comment. I sat on the couch with the note in my hand for over 20 minutes. My thoughts were jumbled. What had Emily meant by, "Get me out of here"? I'd always thought my ex-wife was a strict but good mother, hardworking, dedicated. Had I been wrong all along? I thought about every weekend she came here and said everything was fine. Every emoji-filled message, every quick phone call. And I realized something that cut me to the core. Maybe I'd never really listened to my daughter. Maybe she'd been crying out for help for a long time, just in different ways. I got up and went to her room, where toys she no longer used, school books, and pajamas were still folded on the bed. I touched the bedspread as if searching for a sign. I felt guilty, so much guilt, because while I thought everything was fine, she was screaming for help. That night, I tried calling her. The phone rang 3 times and went to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. Then I texted. I just saw it. Anxiety began to gnaw at my stomach. What if something really serious was happening? What if I was too late to save my own daughter? I grabbed my car keys. I needed to see her. I needed to look into her eyes and understand what that note meant. I couldn't put it off any longer, because when a 13-year-old writes, "Get me out of here," it's not drama, it's desperation. And if I didn't act, I might regret it for the rest of my life. I arrived at my ex-wife's house with my heart pounding in my throat. I rang the doorbell once, twice. She opened the door with a surprised expression, too forced. "You didn't tell me you were coming. Did something happen?" I lied. I said I stopped by because I missed Emily, but deep down I wanted the truth. She hesitated for a second, then called her daughter down the hall. When Emily appeared, my heart nearly stopped. Her eyes were downcast, dull. There were dark circles under her eyes that didn't suit a 13-year-old. She forced a smile, but her mouth trembled. "Hi, Dad," was all she could say. My ex interrupted quickly. "She's had a headache since yesterday. Maybe she shouldn't go out today." My throat went dry. I looked at Emily and said, "Can you give me a hug?" She walked over to me slowly, hugged me, and whispered breathlessly, "You read it, right?" My body froze. I just shook my head, trying not to cry right then and there. I looked into her eyes. "Do you want to come with me now?" She hesitated. She looked back into the house. Then she looked at her mother, who stared at her silently. And then Emily nodded, tears already streaming. Yes, that shattered me into 1,000 pieces. But it also ignited something inside me I'd let die, a protective instinct. I grabbed her backpack, which was already packed, as if she'd known this moment was coming. My ex stood still, then blurted out, "You're overreacting. That's just teenage stuff." I didn't respond. I just said, "If it really is, we'll find out. But I'm not going to wait to find out." And I took my daughter with me. Back at my house, Emily came in silently. She didn't want to eat. She didn't want to shower. She just wanted to lie down on the couch and stay there, under the blanket. I sat next to her. I didn't force conversation. I just stayed there. After a few minutes, she said in a low voice, "She screams all the time. She locks me in the room. She says I'm getting in the way of her life." My body froze. Each word was a knife. I asked calmly, "Does she hit you?" Emily hesitated. "Sometimes. When she drinks. When she's tired. When her boyfriend gets mad." It was like being punched in the gut. The boyfriend? I didn't even know my ex was with anyone, much less that he lived there. Emily told her more. She said he yelled at her, that he'd pushed her, that her mother pretended not to see, that he told her to be quiet, that if she said anything, no one would believe her. She says you only show up once in a while, and that you'll never really want me. Hearing this from my daughter was the cruelest thing I have ever experienced. I felt like a coward, an absent father, someone who believed appearances and ignored the signs. Emily wasn't just sad. She was hurt, and not just on the outside, but inside, in her soul, in her self-esteem, in her trust in the world. This had to stop, and now it was my turn to fight for her. I looked at her and said, "You'll never go back there. I promise." She didn't answer. She just curled up deeper into the blanket, but her eyes finally held a spark. Small, but real. It was hope. It was as if, in that moment, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone really was listening. After Emily fell asleep, I sat on the edge of her bed and watched. Her breathing was still heavy. Every now and then, she flinched as if shielding herself from a blow. It tore me apart. Her every gesture screamed what her mouth had held back for so long: fear, abandonment, loneliness. I went to my room, opened my laptop, and started pulling up old messages, photos, conversations, report cards, and custody records. And then everything started to make sense. The excuses for not coming in on certain weekends, the times she'd appear pale, avoiding eye contact, the vague answers about school. It was all there. I called the school psychologist, with whom I barely knew anything. She answered and hesitated when she heard my name. After confirming that I was the father, she said, "We tried to warn her. We sent a recommendation for an emotional assessment months ago, but we never heard back from the mother." My blood ran cold. I received nothing. She said Emily had been becoming more withdrawn, with episodes of anxiety and even records of self-harm. I froze. "Is my daughter hurting herself?" She replied cautiously. There were signs, but she denied them. We couldn't move forward because she always said everything was fine. And the worst part? I believed it. I hung up with sweaty palms. The shame was greater than the anger. As a father, I had failed. I thought a made bed and a goodnight message were enough. I thought love was about giving space, but it isn't. Love is presence. It's listening. It's seeing what the other person tries to hide. And now I could only do one thing: act. The next day, I contacted a lawyer. I explained everything. I showed him the note, recounted the conversations, mentioned the mother's boyfriend, and asked for guidance. His response was straightforward: "You need to go to court immediately. This is a serious case, and if proven, you can ask for full custody." I filed everything. I filed an official complaint. The system is slow, but when it involves a minor at risk, it takes priority. Even so, each hour felt like a century. And worse, my ex had already noticed. I received a message from her: "You're going to regret putting on this little show." It was the first time I saw her hatred naked and raw. Emily heard the notification on her phone and asked, "Is she mad?" I replied calmly, "It doesn't matter. What matters now is that you're safe." But inside, I trembled, not out of fear for her, but out of regret for never having seen who my daughter really faced every day. Days later, I received a visit from the social workers. They came to interview Emily. She was nervous. She was shaking, but she spoke, and she spoke everything. She told me about the screams, the slaps, her boyfriend's fear, her mother's contempt. The words came out like a tap turned on after a long dry spell, and each word was a blade. When the professionals left, they said, "She was very clear and very courageous. This will help a lot in the process." Emily looked at me with tired but confident eyes. I took her hand and promised again, "No one will ever hurt you again. I'm here, and now I'm staying." It was the least, but it was the beginning of everything. When my ex heard the lawsuit had officially been filed, she freaked out. She called me repeatedly, leaving voicemails, screaming that I was destroying her life, and that Emily was nothing but an ungrateful teenager. I listened to it all with my phone away, trying to remain calm. She went to the school. She made a fuss. She said it was all made up, that her daughter was manipulating the adults. And then, as a final straw, she called some of our relatives, spreading the word that I was kidnapping Emily, preventing contact, and that I was using the justice system to avenge the past. The distortion of the facts was absurd. I started receiving messages from cousins, a distant aunt, even old mutual friends, people who had no idea what was going on but had ready opinions. People who had never shown up to see the girl but now thought they could offer their opinion. It was as if I'd awakened an invisible network of judgments. Emily noticed. She showed me a message she received from her maternal grandmother. "You're ruining your mother. You'll regret it." The girl began to cry uncontrollably. I hugged her, unsure how to protect her emotionally from that cruel pressure. She simply whispered, "Why are they blaming me for telling the truth?" That was a slap. A hard one. Because that's exactly what many victims face, the weight of guilt for someone else's pain. Even though she was the injured party, she still carried the fear of being blamed for messing it up. And there, in the midst of that emotional war, I promised myself I would shield her from everything, even if the whole world turned against us. The hearing date arrived. The tension was unbearable. The courtroom seemed too small to contain so much unresolved pain. My ex was there, wearing heavy makeup and a firm expression. Her boyfriend, even though he was mentioned in the complaint, didn't show up. Emily was by my side, holding my hand tightly. She was the one with the most to lose, or gain. The judge heard both sides. First, my ex. She spoke coldly, denying everything. She said she was a tough but fair mother, that Emily was going through a difficult phase, that she made things up because of my influence. She said I manipulated the girl out of anger and was trying to destroy her emotionally. Her speech was calculated. I rehearsed my anger, but remained silent. Then it was Emily's turn. And she was a giant. She looked at the judge with tears in her eyes, but with a firm voice. She told everything, in detail, with pauses, with courage. She said she didn't want to hate her mother, but that she was afraid to go home. She said she didn't want revenge. She just wanted peace. She asked, her voice trembling, "Please let me live with my father." The room fell silent. Even the judge seemed shaken. He turned to me and asked if I was truly capable of assuming full custody. I said yes, that I wasn't perfect, but now I was ready to be the father she always deserved. I didn't cry in front of him, but inside I broke down. The decision would be given in a few days. But as I left the hearing, Emily looked at me and said, "Even if it doesn't work out, thank you for believing in me." And that sentence, coming from her, was worth more than any legal victory, because for the first time in a long time, she felt heard. And that was already the beginning of healing. It was 5 days of waiting for the court decision. 5 days in which every notification on my phone made me jump out of my chair. Emily tried to maintain her routine, watching movies, drawing, but her eyes were always glazed over. She slept little. At night, she woke with nightmares. And even though I was by her side, fear still lingered within her. On the 5th day, at 3:47 p.m., the lawyer called me. His voice was calm, but firm. "You won. Custody is yours. And you were given an indefinite ban on your stepfather." I closed my eyes. My throat caught. It took me a few seconds to say, "Thanks," and I hung up with a trembling hand. I went to Emily's room. She was wearing headphones, drawing. I knelt in front of her, took one earbud from her ear and said, "You're home now, and no one's going to get you out of here anymore." She stared for a second, as if she hadn't understood. When the realization dawned, she burst into tears, and so did I. There, in that embrace, the whole world disappeared. She repeated over and over, "Really? Really?" And all I could say was, "Yes, seriously." For the first time, the feeling of victory wasn't euphoric. It was a profound silence, a relief that invaded the body like a warm blanket after a long, cold night. The piece smelled of drawing ink and sounded like slow breathing. But even with the decision made, we knew it was just the beginning. Emily would still have to deal with memories, traumas, and triggers. And I, with the responsibility of rebuilding everything I'd let fall apart. But now, we were together, for the first time, truly. And that changed everything. Over the next few days, we established a relaxed routine. We woke up calmly, had coffee together. She told me about her dreams, and I listened attentively. I began to realize she needed little things: security, predictability, simple affection, and I committed to providing them every day. I took Emily to a therapist specializing in childhood trauma. The first session was difficult. She barely spoke, but gradually, with support and patience, she began to open up. She sketched feelings, wrote notes to herself, cried without shame, and each tear was a healing crack, a part of her returning to its place. We also talked about the future, about what she wanted to do, who she wanted to be. We talked about school, moving to a new city, getting a haircut, Simple things that, before, she hadn't felt free to decide. I made it clear, life is yours, and now, you can choose. Her eyes shone with the possibility. Little by little, the Emily I remembered began to return. But now, with something new, strength. She wasn't just a sweet girl anymore. She was someone who survived, who faced down the odds, who had the courage to ask for help, even when she wasn't sure she'd be heard. And that made her a giant in my eyes, bigger than any diploma I'd ever earned. And I learned to be a father. Late, perhaps, but true. I learned that presence is more than being at home. It's noticing. It's asking questions. It's insisting when others are silent. I learned that sometimes, saving someone doesn't require a hero. It just requires you to say, I believe in you, and do it, every day. One Saturday afternoon, I found Emily sitting on her bedroom floor, holding an old red-covered notebook. She looked at me a little sheepishly and said, "Can I show you something?" I sat down next to her. She opened her notebook and began flipping through it. Pages and pages of drawings, loose sentences, scribbled dates. She said, I wrote when I couldn't speak. I read phrases like, "It hurt again today," "Nobody will listen to me anyway," and "Does my father still love me?" Each line was like a knife piercing my chest, but it was also a miracle. My daughter had survived, and now she shared her pain with me, unafraid. There were drawings of locked doors, barred windows, and blurred faces, but also, in the notebook's final months, colors began to appear. Flowers, holding hands, a sun rising behind a roofed house, and a sentence written in large letters, "I think I'm starting to get free now." That broke me. I cried silently, without making a sound, just with my head bowed. Emily put her hand on my shoulder. "Sorry for being silent for so long." And I said, "You didn't have to apologize. I should have listened even when you didn't say anything." And she smiled. For the first time, without pain, I asked to keep the notebook. I said I would protect it like a relic, because there was my daughter's story. Not the one others told, but hers. Real, raw, profound. And now, our mission was to transform that pain into a voice, an example, a warning to anyone going through similar things and thinking they're alone. It was Emily's idea. She said, "Dad, what if we told this story?" I asked, "For whom?" She replied, "For those who don't have the courage to write a note. For those who are trapped and think they'll never get out." And that's how we started. First, she wrote a simple text. Then we recorded a video. Just the two of us, at home. We posted without expectations. But the next day, thousands of views. Comments from mothers, fathers, children, teachers. People saying, "It saved me. My daughter went through this, and I didn't see it. Thank you for speaking." Emily read each message with teary eyes, but with pride. She was doing what no one else had done for her, breaking the silence. We were invited to a support group. Emily started attending, at first shy, then active. One day, she told the other girls, "If you think no one cares, you're wrong." I thought that too, but there was someone, and that someone was my father. Everyone cried, and I was there, listening, not knowing how to hold back my tears. She became a little reference. She started drawing posters with phrases like, "It's not your fault," "Speak, even when you're scared," and "You deserve peace." The school got involved, the community embraced, and I realized that without realizing it, my daughter had turned scars into weapons, and wounds into beacons. That taught me one of the greatest lessons of my life. What saves a child isn't just physical shelter. It's a look that sees, a listening ear that validates, and a love that doesn't give up, even when the other person shuts them down. And now, Emily was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, and a guide to so many others. I managed to move house. It was small, modest, but ours. A place that smelled of a new beginning. Emily helped choose the paint for the rooms, the furniture, even the living room curtains. And each decision was a form of healing. It was as if, by rebuilding that home, she was also rebuilding the broken parts within herself. She wanted a room with big windows and lots of light. She said, "I want to wake up seeing the sky, not the walls." That touched me deeply, because for years, she lived in the dark, suffocated, and now all she wanted was to breathe, to see color, to see the horizon, and I would do anything to guarantee that for her, every day. On weekends, we planted flowers in the small garden. Emily said each flower represented a part of her life she didn't want to forget, not even the bad parts. because even pain taught me to protect myself. I've never met anyone so young with such emotional clarity. My daughter was a miracle. She went back to school. And for the first time in a long time, she wanted to participate in activities and engage with her classmates. She started smiling in photos again. She started saying, "I love you," naturally. And, in a moment of pure spontaneity, she said to me, "Dad, now I understand what it's like to have a real home." And that destroyed me inside and out, because I knew that for so long, I'd failed to give her that. But now, even though I was late, I was delivering. And seeing my daughter blossom after everything was living proof that starting over is possible, as long as someone has the courage to hold on tight, even when all seems lost. A year later, I got an unexpected call. It was my ex. Her voice was different, more tired, less arrogant. She simply said, "I know I lost Emily, and maybe I lost her forever, but I wanted to thank you, because I wouldn't have the courage to do what you did." I was silent for a few seconds. She continued, "I denied a lot. I hid behind my pain, my ego, but now I see. And if one day she wants to forgive me, I'll be here." I responded calmly. I said I wouldn't interfere with Emily's decision, but that she was right about one thing. Courage is choosing to do the right thing, even when it's too late. I didn't tell Emily anything that day. I waited for the right moment. When I did, she listened silently. Then she said, "I don't hate her, Dad. I just walked away because it was the only way to survive." And then, taking a deep breath, he added, "If I ever want to talk to her, it will be for me, not out of pity." And I respected it. This was proof that my daughter had grown beyond her pain. She no longer harbored hatred, but she also didn't harbor illusions. She had learned to protect herself, to prioritize herself, to set boundaries. And that was maturity. It was strength. It was something many adults can't achieve. And she had achieved it at just 14 years old. I realized then that forgiveness might not be immediate, but the cycle of pain, silence, and abandonment, that yes, had been broken. And breaking that cycle was the greatest legacy I could leave her. Because now, she wasn't just a survivor. She was the author of her own story. And that, no one could take that away. It was late afternoon. The sun was streaming through her bedroom window, turning everything orange. Emily was lying down, listening to music, when she called out to me, "Dad, look at this." She showed me a drawing she had made. 2 small figures walking side by side, each holding a flower. In the background, a phrase, "Freedom lives where there is love without fear." I stared at it, speechless for a while. That was my daughter. That was the girl who once wrote me a note, begging me to leave a place that hurt her. And now, she was drawing freedom. She spoke of love with confidence. She created art with a heart at peace. I asked her what she felt looking at that drawing. She said, "For the first time, I think I'm happy. Not always, but truly, without having to hide anything." And that was enough, because true happiness isn't perfect, but it's light. And hers had color. It had music. It had laughter. It had ground. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The journey was difficult, tense, full of guilt, pain, and bitter decisions. But today, looking at her, I understood that we don't just save those we love, we save ourselves together. I thought I was rescuing my daughter, but she rescued me too. She lifted me from indifference. She woke me up. She made me a real father. If one day everything is forgotten, let at least this remain. When a child writes, "Get me out of here," it's not drama. It's a cry, and that cry can never be ignored, because whoever listens with an open heart changes a life, and sometimes saves two. If you've stuck around this far, thank you, truly, because this isn't just a story, it's a mirror, it's a warning, and maybe it's the push someone needs to take action, to better listen to their son, their daughter, their student, their friend, or even themselves. Write in the comments where you're listening from, and if you'd like, share. Have you ever been through something similar? Do you know anyone who's written or received a note asking for help? I read each comment carefully, and many of them end up inspiring other stories like this. Your voice can transform. If this video touched you, share it. On WhatsApp, in your family group, with that quiet colleague, with that dad who thinks he knows everything. Sometimes, a story is all it takes to open an eye that's been closed for years. Share it now. Don't put it off. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and like. Here, you'll find stories that matter. Real, lived stories, full of pain, but also healing, because we're not alone. And when a story touches you, it plants something in everyone. And if no one told you this today, let me say this: you matter. What you feel is valid. And if you're stuck in a dark place, know that there is a way out. There always is. And you deserve to be happy, without fear, without pain, without silence, until the next story.